Hi, everyone. Welcome to Food Talk Live. A reminder that this episode will also appear on our podcast, Food Talk with Danny Nierenberg. So please subscribe, rate, and review wherever you listen to podcasts. I've been thinking a lot this week and really over the last couple of months about the power of art in our lives. My co-founder, Bernard Pollock, and I were planning to open this off-Broadway show that he created called Garjana over the summer at La Mama, which is a nonprofit theater in New York City. We were really excited about it, but for obvious reasons, theaters closed down right now, and it's given us some time to reflect on the power of what we want and what we want to create with this really immersive, fun musical. And so when we were all able to get together again, Bernie has some new ideas for it, and I think it'll be a really powerful way of communicating issues around food security and food insecurity, climate change, global shocks like what we're seeing now with COVID-19, and so many other things that impact the food system and really all of our lives. And I've been thinking about the power of art right now, watching the uprisings across the nation and really across the world as people respond to the murders of George Floyd and others by police. And, I was reminded the other day that the uprisings that we're seeing are not just about the police brutality. They're about systemic racism. They are about racism that has, been generational, that has, sort of infected all of us, and the need to change that. And so I think, art is not considered essential right now. It's not in this position. We'll talk about that with our amazing guest, Emily Simoness, who works as the executive director of space on Ryder Farm. But I think it's more essential than ever, and I can't wait to hear Emily's views on that. But before I do, I want to read two poems by two very different poets that I think sort of speak to the times that we're in and give me hope and inspiration, and also I think the much needed reflection that we all need at this time, and just inspire the power of art in me. And I also want to mention that the Smithsonian Magazine this week has, you can find it online for free very easily, these amazing murals and art that have been done of George Floyd over the last week. And George Floyd is an angel and really powerful, make me very emotional, very powerful depictions of this man who represents so many other people who have been impacted by police brutality. So the first poem I'm going to read is The Piece of Wild Things by poet Wendell Berry, who I've had the pleasure of meeting many times, and who's a wonderful speaker and storyteller. And so again, it's called The Piece of Wild Things. When despair for the world grows in me, and I wake in the night at the least sound in fear of what my life and what my children's lives may be, I go and lie down where the wood drake rests in his beauty on the water, and the great heron feeds. I come into the peace of wild things who do not tax their lives with forethought of grief. I come into the presence of still water, and I feel above me the day-blind stars waiting with their light for a time I rest in the grace of the world and am free. And so the next poem I'm going to read is A Small Needful Fact by Ross Gay. And he is a gardener and a teacher in Bloomington, Indiana, and a very powerful poet. And so he writes, is that Eric Gardner worked for some time for the Parks and Recreation Horticultural Department, which means perhaps that with his very large hands, perhaps in all likelihood, he put gently into the earth some plants, which most likely, some of them, in all likelihood, continue to grow, continue to do what such plants do, like house and feed and small necessary creatures, like being pleasant to touch and smell, like converting sunlight into food, like making it easier for us to breathe. So I want to thank those poets and so many others and artists who are really critical during this time. And I'm so glad that Emily is with us. Again, she works as the executive director of space on Ryder Farm, where she aims to help artists curate their work and oversees the operations of the farm, which is currently providing produce to food insecure families. She holds a background in theater, and I brings a lot of creativity and energy to this space. And I'm just really honored that she could be on the show today. So thank you so much for joining me, Emily.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me, Danielle. I'm such a fan of the work you all are doing. And those poems.
Ooh. I got chills by reading them. And so I think they're great reminders of this sort of moment we're all going through. Yeah. I want to get into this very quickly with you, though, about this. I mean, I'm not an artist. I really don't have a creative bone in my body other than being a writer. And, but I feel like art has always helped me from, my parents were always very good about bringing us to museums and having books about art around our in our small ranch house in Defiance, Missouri. So art was always an important part of my life. And I feel like, especially during these kinds of times when we're grief stricken or we're sick or we're afraid of something or afraid of getting sick, that art is really essential. But that's not the case when it comes to paying artists. So I'm hoping you can talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, it's been sort of, it's been wild to run an institution with one foot in what is deemed an essential business, the farm,
Very
right?
essential, right?
Very essential, like foundational, right? Like shelter, food, that's sort of the gig, right? And then one foot in it's like barely even phase 4. Do you know what I mean? They're like, wait, what? Arts and culture? Totally not essential. And to be, having conversations with community members, funders, staff, not to mention my artistic folks that are colleagues of mine in the artistic space who they're not in the food space, right? Mm-hmm. So I just say that as a framing at the beginning, which is like the last thing I ever could have expected coming into this year, is that the part of my business that, I founded and am most comfortable in is the part that, given COVID-19 is not possible, right? To do healthfully. You know what I'll say about artists is that they are you could say the same thing about farmers. They're so freaking scrappy, like constraints, like being able to bump up against constraints is in their DNA.
Yeah.
And that's not to say at this moment isn't incredibly challenging, right? But it is to say that that's the gig, right? So they're made, I don't want to say like artists are made for this moment, but this is not perhaps an unfamiliar, like obviously it's an unfamiliar moment, but it's in some ways I think a moment that they're have made friends with a long time ago. The other thing I was going to say is that early on in the COVID, gosh, it feels like a different lifetime, at the end of March or whatever, we sent a survey around to our artist alumni, so about 1,400 people, about, have you lost a stable source of income? Have you lost healthcare? Talk to me about, are you food insecure? And I think something like 80% of respondents said that, yes, they had lost, one gig, if not 7 gigs. Wow. I think 70% were going to lose health insurance if they hadn't already. So yeah, it's a, and rent in New York City, where many artists live, ain't cheap. So, and I am sure that right now in, tiny 500 square foot apartments in New York, people are writing the next great fill in the blank, right? Musical, album, novel, play. Like, I mean, I don't want to say I can't wait to see what comes out of this, but I can't wait to see what comes out of this. Right.
Right.
Yeah. I don't know if that isn't.
Yeah, no, I've been thinking about that a lot too. Like, what are the novels? Because I'm a really voracious reader. What are the novels that are going to come out of this time? And
totally.
We saw, and we still see, sort of the effects that 9/11 had, or the effects. I lived in New Orleans for a long time. Katrina, there are still books being written about sort of, disasters. And I just think, we're going to see this happening for a very long time. And it does give you some hope, though, right? It gives you something to look forward to, the creativity that a crisis inspires. And I couldn't agree with you more that artists, of all types, whether we're talking about musicians or writers or singers or, whoever we're talking about, they have a lot in common with farmers, because you do have to hustle. You do have to be scrappy. You're always thinking of like the next thing, and you have to sort of plan. And, my heart hurts for places like New Orleans, which depends so much. I mean, people flock to New Orleans because of the art and the music and the food, obviously, and all of those things have been affected. I'm wondering if you can describe, so, you do you do such sort of interesting stuff. If you could paint a picture for our viewers and listeners of this, this creative community that you've created and what it means and what it is.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to say one more thing about the synergies between artists and farmers, and then I absolutely delighted to answer that question. The other thing that I think is really similar is that both artists and farmers have to be invested in and satisfied by process. Yeah. Because there's no promise of product, right? Like, right? Like there just isn't. Like you have to love the process. You have to like have hope and belief and faith and passion for the process. So I just wanted to say that.
Yeah, like that danger a little bit. Like
absolutely. 100%. That has to like be part of your like, you're sort of, I'm doing a gesture for those who are listening, sort of in your DNA, right? That's just like anyway, I just wanted to note that. In terms of what we do at Space. Okay. So yeah, it's sort of wild. So the farm has been in my extended family since 1795. Wow. I'm eighth generation on the land. So I grew up in Minneapolis, had heard folklore about this distant farm on the East Coast that had been in my family for centuries, never visited. My mom was a family member, never visited, went to college in North Carolina, moved to Brooklyn in 2007. And on a lark, I cold called my fourth cousin once removed, Betsy Ryder, and said, "Hey, I'm related to you. Can I come check out that farm that's been in our family?" Like you do. And so 3 things happened on that day in March of 2009. One, I took Metro North out of Grand Central Terminal and thought I was going to upstate New York. So I thought I was going like, at least 4 hours, sure. Which some people wouldn't even call that upstate. But anyway, 85 minutes. So, oh my gosh, it's 85 minutes from the city. Second aha moment, I thought it was going to be an 8-acre vegetable plot, but it's a 127-acre expanse. Wow. And then third, and probably most important, is that I opened the door to the 1790s homestead, and it was clear that it hadn't been lived in or taken care of for a very long time. So not what I thought I was going to find. I thought I was going to take a picture, call my mom, say I did it, go back to my life. I was pursuing acting. Okay. Went back to the city, couldn't stop thinking about it. Super clear that it needed TLC, needed new life, new energy. Other thing that was true in my life is that I was in a community of artists that didn't have time and space to work on their creative pursuits, which, like, getting back to the earlier point, like that's just true of artists from the dawn of time, right? And so those 2 needs, the artist's need for time and space and my newly discovered family farm's need for resurrection, collided. And I pitched to my 4th cousin and new 4th cousins that I just met, could I bring up some friends? The initial idea was, can I bring up some artist friends? Can we make capital improvements on the structures? And in exchange, can we get to work on our art? I was 26. They had never met me. Didn't know who the hell I was. Sure, that sounds fine. So that was the summer of 2010. We, scrappy artist friends, scraping and painting and spackling buildings and working on art. And it was totally fabulous and great. Then I was like, we should actually do something. We should actually like make a 501c3 nonprofit, which is a fun, exciting exercise. Very fun, right? Which you know about. Yeah, stinks. For those of you out there listening, totally stinks. Anyway, founded the nonprofit officially in 2011 with the mission of supporting artists and activists in their work and contributing to the sustainability and resourceful preservation of Ryder Farm. Okay. So really, I would say for the first, the first 8 years, the focus was really on arts. And we bring up about 130 to 150 artists a season for 1 to 5 week fully subsidized residencies. Very, artists of all stripes. So a lot of the different mediums that we've referenced earlier in the talk. Days are grounded in 3 square meals from the farm. You have to attend the meals. You have to share some of what you've created at the end of your residency, and you have to give back 2 hours to the farm. So those are the 3 mandates on your time. The rest is yours to do what you want to do. Obviously, you go through a rigorous application process, all that jazz before. But so more or less, that was the thrust of the programming. Now, back to my 4th cousin, Betsy, who had been farming the land since 1978.
Wow.
Yeah. And an ER nurse. So just think about that. Both things. And part of it was that we were going to lose the land because developers were circling and taxes were rising in the 70s, and we needed to get the ag abatement. And so she stepped up to the plate. Anyway, she's fantastic, but wanted to retire, as you would understand. And there was really no one to take on the farming. And so I said, well, Space will do it. And so we had been from basically 16, supporting Betsy in the back end of the business. So sort of like working on the CSA, being at the market with her. She's one of the founding farms at the Union Square Green Market.
Nice.
So really sort of like understood the administration, right? Mm-hmm. And then in 2019 took over the actual running of the farm business.
Wow.
So this is our second year. This is my second year overseeing a farm. Lot to learn, very humbled. I thought starting an artist residency was hard, and then I had a year of farming. With the main centerpiece of the farm being a sliding scale CSA. Last year was 150 members. This year we scaled back a tiny bit to 130. Mm-hmm. And last year, 16% were fully subsidized. And this year, we had only planned on 20%. And then COVID happened.
Sure.
And the last thing I'll say, then I'll stop this monologue, is that I was on a call with, a bunch of local nonprofits working around issues of food insecurity. And one cited that they had seen a 600% increase in calls around food insecurity. Wow. And I got the call and said to the team, we have to do more. So we're giving away 50% of the veggies. Wow. So 65 families for 18 weeks. So amidst all this darkness, it has been a bright spot to work on that.
That's amazing. I believe it's only your second year. So just to make this clear, you had no farming experience before you went into this.
No, I mean, I've lived on Ryder Farm for the last 9 years, right. And I'm related to Betsy, and so I've
you learned some things, but that's a lot to take on. And then COVID. Yeah. I mean, those are just a lot. That's a lot to combine that with the other things you do to support artists. Yeah. I'm interested when you look at the applications of the folks who are applying, and I bet you get more applications than you know what to do with. Are you looking for folks who are artists plus, have farming experience, or does it matter to you?
It's a great question. Yeah, we got about 1,400 applications this year for what we thought were going to be 150 slots. Obviously, we're not holding residencies right now because people aren't convening in groups of 10. So first we give 50% of our residencies to people of color and other underrepresented voices. So that's a huge one of our mandates. Obviously looking for artistic merit. And I will say that folks who can speak specifically, you can make art anywhere, right? Like people, again, getting back to the earlier point, so scrappy, you can make art in a closet.
Right.
So, one of the questions intentionally on the application is why Ryder Farm, right? And I've read so many applications, most about, I like to get out of the city. Well, yes, everybody likes to get out of the city. So really though, rigorously interrogate why on a farm? Why is that interesting, right?
Right.
And I will say, I don't know if I would say that I don't know how intentional it is, but we have a good number of folks in residence who either are writing about the natural world, have a history,
mm-hmm.
with farming, with agriculture, with, who are connoisseurs of Wendell Berry. No, but they're
sure.
they are deliberate about wanting to be on the farm making art because it is part of what they are interested in creating.
That's really beautiful. That's really beautiful.
Yeah.
And I mean, I think it speaks to this point. Bernie and I think about this a lot. How do you get different? You know, we're all sort of stuck in our silos in the food and agriculture movement, and you know, one of our you know, one of the parts of our mission is really to break down those silos. And it's not just, you know, getting economists to talk to, you know, farmers. It's breaking down the system so that we can all sort of appreciate the value and beauty and joy and importance of food. And the arts community, you know, Bernie has always cited such an obvious, you know, sort of partner in all of this because of the work that you do and the creativity that's involved. And then, like you said before, the similarity of farmers to artists in terms of being able to take risks and try and fail and, you know, and fail again and try again. And I think it's experimentation that you know is part of all of this, and you know, and scrappy nonprofits like yours and like mine also have that sort of, you know, living on the edge kind of mentality that I think brings we have this ability to pivot, we have this ability to be creative and type to see that, you know, bigger institutions don't, and I think all of those things combined really make a difference.
Huge. I mean, like, I was so grateful that I was in a position where I could pivot and say, like, I know we said 20%, but we're going to do 50%. And yes, that does mean we have to fundraise more in a time when everyone's telling you it's a bad time to fundraise. Don't you know what I mean? Like there's a global pandemic and now there's a revolution, which
thank God,
just in time, thank God. You know, like, seriously, like, you know, thank God it's arrived. And perhaps like that was, you know, not the most conservative decision, right? To say we're going to go in that direction, but like there wasn't another decision to make,
right?
In my opinion,
right.
And people answered the call. I mean, we had to raise, well, the goal is 100,000 for that initiative, and we've done, I think, like 94, but 40% of the donations are for $50 or less.
Wow.
Like, it's amazing. It's amazing because people want to help, you know? Yeah. And I think about colleagues of mine who are at much bigger institutions that are so, I mean, to move their left arm is like 5 years, do you know?
Right.
And, you know, as someone who's newer to the scene, I'm like, ooh, how could I not have that happen?
Yeah.
Because I would never want to be in a position where, I mean, obviously we can't answer every call, right? Like, it's a really, particularly now, it feels like, wow, oh God, you look left and there's, I mean, it's really challenging.
Absolutely.
And it's incumbent, I think, upon nonprofits who are in a position of service to like meet the needs where they can responsibly, right? So I have felt like last year I was like, I think I even said to your co-founder, Bernard, I was like, farming is so hard. I mean, I was so humbled.
Sure.
And I thought 2020 was going to be a new page, you know, and then COVID happens. But I was so grateful that I could get up in the morning and work on something that was deemed essential. Like,
absolutely.
Oh my God. Like, thank God.
Oh yeah, I know. I get it. You know, I want to make sure that people know where to donate. Could you give that website?
Yeah, it's www.space, like outer space, on Ryder, like the truck, farm.org. So www.spaconryderfarm.org.
Just to be clear, is this the Friend of the Harvest Fund?
Yes.
Okay,
It's
great.
the Friend of the Harvest Fund. Yes.
Friend of the Harvest Fund. And one of the questions I had for you about it is, you know, we don't know how long this crisis is going to go on. And I know fundraising is hard, but is it something that you would consider doing next year as well?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, one of the pledges that we made last year was that we weren't going to take away the subsidy after we gave it to families. So it wasn't like you get it this year, but then you're going to take it away. Like, that's not the point. Is to like build a sustainable source of food for folks who otherwise would not have it. Right. So, you know, wasn't my plan going into 2021 that we would be doing 50%. No, but we will be doing 50%. And the first folks that we will go to are the folks who, already had the resource. Would you like to build upon that? So, yeah.
That's great. And what has been the reaction from the folks who are recipients, these clients of yours who are recipients of the produce?
Yeah. In Brewster, which is close to the farm, is a pretty large Guatemalan population. So a lot are actually Spanish speaking. And I must say, I am not Spanish speaking, which I need to be. However, and I will say that when I first introduced the idea of the CSA to an ESL class in downtown Brewster, someone's translating for me. I think the concept of CSA is hard if it's being told to you in the language you understand, like in the language that is your first, right? Like it's like, ooh, what did I No. So trying to explain it, folks first thought that I was asking them to work on the farm. And then it was really a trust building exercise. I mean, there's a lot of xenophobia in Brewster. There's an ICE presence.
People are afraid to give out their information, I'm sure.
That's right. So I was very incredibly grateful to Norma Pereira, who's a local organizer, who's since has become a member of Spaces Advisory Board and really was a liaison in helping to build that trust. I will say that by the end of the 18 weeks, right? So after we had really worked to show up and be specific and intentional and kind, the largely English as a second language members asked if they could cook us, the staff and the farmers, a dinner in the 1795 homestead. So they brought a bunch of Guatemalan dishes and cooked for the farmers. And a lot of them got up and testified in Spanish about the experience. And again, I don't speak Spanish, but the feeling, the intention I could understand. And it was incredibly moving. And, my ambition is, we're in an interesting place geographically, the farm. We're in the midst, really on the Westchester-Putnam border. And Putnam is pretty economically depressed and Westchester is very affluent.
Yeah.
And just like our artist table, we try to bring more in different voices and have it really be heterogeneous. I want that to be the CSA table as well. Like, I really want to say, like, that for me was why the sliding scale was designed, right? It's like, no, you're all at the table. And like, how can we continue to sort of like, not necessarily make the table, like, I guess make the table bigger, but like, how is it as inclusive as possible, right?
Yeah. First, which all of those ingredients make it better,
No, and like richer and more interesting, like I hadn't eaten a lot of those dishes and they were amazing. So yeah, long story longer, the response has been really positive, but it has not been necessarily like happened in a day. I mean, like this takes time. And I think like the work is not ever done. So I'm excited to like roll up my sleeves and meet these new families and like see, where the conversations take us.
That's awesome. That really resonates with me because of a conversation we had yesterday with a young nutrition activist who, just finished undergrad, and she's been working with communities around what she calls nutrition justice.
Cool.
It's relationship building. And she's like, you can't just go in and tell people what to eat or tell them, this recovered food from a campus dining service or whatever. You should eat it. You have to build that relationship. And I think that's so powerful, the relationship building.
Oh.
And it makes me, your description of what the CSA table should look like just makes me think that more artists should be farmers because beautifully, So we have a question. So it's from someone named Molly. As an artist who spent time in the wolf world after college, your project on Ryder Farm is a great development of what other interns and myself were seeking. I wish you success in continuing space. So
thank you, Molly. Appreciate that. Yeah, I mean, in some ways I don't have, because I haven't been like, I wasn't trained as a farmer, not dissimilar from like, I wasn't trained as a nonprofit leader. I guess my style is to sort of just like get in there and do it. And obviously it has not been all sunshine and roses, but I do think that like so much of this stuff is fundamental, like building relationships with people, asking them what they need, coming to their neighborhood, you know, like it listening. We don't listen enough. I think like, obviously it wouldn't, if we all listened more, I don't think everything would be solved, but I think so much would be better.
Yeah. I mean, I just, all of that resonates so deeply with me. I don't know if you know this from listening to your conversations with Bernie, my co-founder, but when we spent a lot of time on the ground in sub-Saharan Africa, and what we tried to do was just listen to folks instead of like interrogating them, or, you know, our job was not to tell people what to do, it was to observe what was happening around agricultural innovation. And just by listening and like asking fewer questions, you know, you get a lot more out of these conversations. You have an actual dialogue, and you have, you know, that you start building that trust, because people are very open. Oh, you just want to listen to what I'm doing? You want to tell me how to do it? Because that's what most white people who come here tell us what to do.
Right.
I think
that's right.
That idea of asking communities what they want and need is, you know, it's become a fundamental shift in both international development and domestic development, that you can't say, oh, I'm going to solve your problem. Here are the tools to do it. It's figuring out, you know, through all of this participatory research and active listening, what those communities actually want, and what, you know, and I'm sure, you know, I know CSAs who work very closely with, you know, communities from El Salvador and elsewhere, and so they'll ask them, like, what do you want us to grow? Like, what do you know, how can we grow more of the greens that you used at home, or those things? And it's a really sort of mutually beneficial, you know, process, and it just makes me, again, it's just something so wonderful that when you bring people together, you can have more of that interaction.
Yeah. Yes. And it reminds me too, so we're sending out our first CSA email about next week's pickup, because it's our first pickup, and talking to the communications team. And, you know, we used to do one whole thing in Spanish and one whole thing in English, and it was like 7,000 emails, and it was bound to get messed up and all the things. And creative director just said, why don't we just have the Spanish next to the English? Like, why don't we just have one side be English and one side be Spanish? And like, we don't need to like even say, just so you know, it'll be self-evident that some folks' first language is English and some folks' first language is Spanish. And like, that is a like, and we're going to do it all together. And like, you're all going to get the same information, you know, like there isn't, and we're not going to like underline it for you that like we're doing a good thing, you know, like it's like, these are the members of the CSA, and some of them speak this language and some of them speak that. And so we're going to send one email that has both languages.
That's,
you know, I think it's,
oh yeah,
you know, and it's like, I was like, oh God, you know, overthinking it. And then I was just like, yeah, anyway, I could go on, but I think, yeah, I think it's like, how do we just be more inclusive without patting ourselves on the back and showing everyone how inclusive we are? Do you know?
Oh my God, I love that statement. I think so much of like what we've seen this week is like, oh, you know, people patting themselves on the back for what, you know, they've done nothing. They've been part of the problem.
That's
and
right.
recognizing that and being able to get through that and just be, you know, a good ally, to be helpful when needed. Those are the kinds of things and that we need more of, and obviously the listening. I'm interested in your advice to, you know, artists using their own platforms, whether they're, you know, fellows on your farm or just, you know, working in the world, how they can use their own platforms to become more engaged in food and agriculture and sort of this wider issue of equity and equality and accessibility and affordability of food.
Yeah.
Easy question, right?
Yeah, no, I mean, I was having a conversation yesterday with some scenic designers, because, you know, all the theaters in New York are not being used.
Right.
And there's about to be a bunch of empty storefronts, right? Like we're going to have a lot of real estate with nothing in it. And so these amazing scenic designers were like, you know, is there an opportunity to put like urban farms in some of these theaters? And I was like, yeah, totally. Like, yes, 1,000%. Like, and, you know, maybe farms could pair with one theater. And, you know, we were just sort of having this whole brainstorm. And I think each person on the call said, like, gosh, I really hope the learning from this moment sticks with us. Like, I hope that like people's new understanding of the food chain or supply chain, I'm so tired, issues, you know, like they're like, oh, get to know your farm, like the local, all of the things that were like groovy and amazing and oh so bourgeois and are now like just necessary, right? Like it's like no. Like you actually, like, this is how you're going to get your food, right? Like, how can we take that learning forward, right? Because now it's like, it's been necessary. Like in order for me to get what I have needed in the way of food for the last, you know, it's 3 months now. I've had to you know, I obviously, because I've been a farmer now for 2 years, I've known about these things, but friends of mine have had to like educate themselves, right? So I think the first thing is like, and I don't know the answer, but a lot of the conversations I'm having, whether it's about racial justice or food insecurity, socioeconomic disparity, is like, how do we carry these learnings and transform them into action? Because I think if we move too quickly out of this moment, we'll just kind of coast back into the pretty deadly systems of oppression in all of the directions that are pretty formidable, right? So that's not an answer. It's more of a musing on what you said. I will say that in the artist community, folks are talking about food in a way that I've never heard people talk about food. That is something I will say, is like, it just hasn't been, I mean, not to say it's not like important. People love food. People love, you know, sort of a platitude, but I think the education around it and the investigation of it and the participation in it has been an essential tool for survival, right? And so I know that conversations are happening, and that is a step in the right direction. Whether that will stick, who knows?
Well, I think it gets back to what we discussed at the outset of this, that I think artists and can be important in helping us remember the learnings, right? So that we don't go back to the kind of awful manual that we didn't know was so awful before. There's, you know, that through their art form, whatever it is, whether it's music or these amazing murals that I was talking about earlier, that it creates the inability to go back, right? Because we have that, and we have them telling us that, you know, this is unacceptable, and it's sort of a new vision for the world.
Yeah, I mean, storytelling, right? It's like as old as it gets. And like I said, I think that the art that is currently being made in this moment today, the 5th of June, is amazing. Like, I think like whatever is being incubated right now, like it's gonna remind us, and hopefully in some ways hold us accountable collectively. Yeah. Like that's what I think about, like, and you know, when we can gather again. So that's also the piece of it, right? Is like, so much of at least theater, which is my background, is about gathering, and like, what do you do when you can't gather? So that, for me, that piece of it remains to be seen. Like,
what are you thinking though? I mean, you know, a million phone calls a day trying to think through, you know, how, you know, whenever it is, if it's 6 months from now or 18 months from now, what theater will look like. And I'm just wondering what you're envisioning.
You know, it's interesting. I mean, I have so many colleagues doing different things. Some are like, I'm not interested in Zoom for theater. We're not doing it. We're going to postpone it indefinitely, right? There are some folks who are talking about the minute that I think theater is phase 4 in New York. We're going to do, you know, we're going to take out a fourth of the seats or a fifth or a half of the seats, and, you know, whatever. There are, I guess I stopped myself because most people are sort of like, the pause button is on, right? Like it's like a real pause. And even if all butts are in the seats, theater is still not exactly a money-making pursuit, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah. And I will also say, like, personally, I go to the theater to have an experience. Like, you're in the theater and Bernie's in the theater, my husband's in the theater, and we're all watching the same thing. Like, it's the reason I go to the theater and choose it oftentimes over a film, because I want to, or over Netflix, because I want to collectively view and have catharsis, etc. What do I think? I think there'll be less theaters, unfortunately. I think folks are going to have a lot of time to figure out how to make the theater more sustainable, right? Because like it was already pretty unsustainable, and had, you know, I can talk as like a person running a predominantly white institution, like huge racial inequities in terms of not just who's on stage or who's being produced, but the staffs of theaters, right? So I think it's a huge moment of reflection. I hope what we all see, and I'm saying this myself too, is a more racially diverse group of people, both making it and supporting it. I mean, it's going to be really good too, because people, I mean, I think about the work that got canceled this spring, and like just those shows alone, I think about, like, including yours wasn't it was La Mama, right?
Yeah.
Is that what you said at the beginning? Yeah. Like, I think about the amount of theater that was canceled, plus anywhere from, like you said, 6 months to 18 months worth of incubation. I mean, it's going to be freaking fantastic. It's going to be like gangbusters.
Craving it, right?
Sorry?
People will be craving it.
Oh, totally. And I think like that first time back in the theater, once people actually feel safe to be back, I mean, it's going to be, I don't have words. I get goosebumps, you know. I think it'll be, it'll probably be post word. It probably won't have a word that could adequately describe it. But I do think that there'll be less. Like, I think just like every industry, I don't want to say every industry, but like, this is not a good moment for the theater.
No, it certainly isn't. But like you said before, because there's such an incubation period in all the art that's being created and all the scripts that I can't imagine that are being written right now, you know, they're going to be phenomenal because people haven't had this, you know, time of reflection that you mentioned. And, you know, they're still trying to survive, right? And that's why we need, you know, the federal government to step up to the plate and realize the essentialness of not only food workers, but people who are creative folks who need to be supported during this time, and things like paycheck protection programs and a universal living wage. These are all the things that could really keep artists in business during this time. But, you know, it remains to be seen if we'll get there.
Yeah, it really has sort of laid bare what we all knew. But yeah, a $1,200 check doesn't really do it. You know, so many of these artists that I know are gig artists, right? They're folks who job in, you know. I mean, my husband's one of those people. Like, it's not, you know, unemployment is not unfamiliar to these people because they're gig, but this kind of like unknowable amount of time between now and whenever we convene again is, you know, it's formidable. But I do think that if we really use this pause, which is nothing we can do about it, to really examine our institutions and really examine the power structures, like, we truly do have an opportunity that would not have happened otherwise. Like,
absolutely.
I wasn't going to take 4 months off, you know. I mean, I'm not taking 4 months off, but like, that was not in the cards for any of us, right?
Right.
And so,
plans.
No, and like,
we're more busy now, but we're kind of busy, you know.
Yeah, and like, what are we doing with the time? Like, what is this? You know, what sort of, how are we holding ourselves accountable for when we can do the work again? You know.
Absolutely, and that has like been the theme of this podcast / livecast for the last, you know, 85 days. I've lost count. I don't know.
Yeah.
You know, like, how can we not go back to the way things were? How do we transform and create and build and think about what was wrong and fix it and come back stronger than ever. So I think, that's really lovely that you're also thinking about that in the arts community. It just speaks to the strength of these two communities really being part of one another.
I also think it shows the interconnectedness, right? It's like we're all having the same conversation.
Right.
I mean, it's nuanced, right? Like it's a bit nuanced and different, but like everyone's bleary-eyed, devastated / hopeful / any adjective possible. And I think if anything, this, like you said, 85, 87, who knows how many freaking days, there is a fundamental humanity that we're all, we're all living a somewhat shared experience here of, wow, the bottom fell out. There is no ground. And I think that if individuals and institutions each hold themselves accountable and that ripples out, like by sheer numbers, we should be able to solve all of America's problems.
Right.
I jest. I know. And vote.
Oh my God. Yes. Please, everyone. Most important thing you can do.
You do nothing else for the rest of 2020.
Yep. Agreed. I want to make sure people have your website again. It's Ryder with a Y, farm.org, ryderfarm.org. We'll have that available on our website and on our social media. My last question for you, Emily, is who is inspiring you the most right now?
I watched who's inspiring me the most today. Well, this has been a very inspiring conversation. And Brian Stevenson, who wrote Just Mercy. I watched his TED Talk this morning, which I want to pull up the name of it because it was fabulous. We need to talk about it. We need to talk about an injustice, Brian Stevenson.
Great. Okay.
24 minutes. If you have 24 minutes, which you probably do, someone in the next week, I highly recommend it. I just think we can't, if we're not going to have this reckoning now, I don't think we're going to get another opportunity to have this reckoning. And I think like we can't continue. I don't want to say we, I'm going to say I can't continue to know on some level about the incredible disparity between what it means to be white in America and what it means to be a person of color, specifically Black in America, and not have, like, that needs to be a rigorous interrogation for me. And there needs to be an accountability for me every day. And I think I don't think we're going to get a shot at this again. And not in our life. I just don't think I don't think revolutions come around. I think they only come around every, but I really mean that. I think like it's such an opportunity. And I think the more that I can educate myself and provide resources to myself and my staff and my family, and not look away, and have the harder conversations. And I think that I need to do a better job of that. And I think that I'm finding inspiration in learning from folks who it's part of it has been part of their life's work from the beginning. And I think so I'm sort of rambling, but I think you get the gist.
You weren't rambling. That was cool and such great advice for us all. And you have really inspired me today, and I kind of needed it. So
I'm glad.
Thank you for joining me.
Of course, it was such a pleasure.
I can't wait to visit the farm when
Yes.
A reminder that this episode will also appear on our podcast at Food Talk with Danny Nierenberg. And I hope folks will join me on our next episode when I'll be talking to Mark Zingring from the Nature Conservancy. Emily, I adore you. Thank you.
Oh, Such fun. So lovely talking. Have a great weekend.
You too. Stay well.
Yeah, you too. Bye.